Hi everybody, this is Angel Arts, and this is vlog number 4 for session number 4 of our Sinlyn Trials 5th edition D&D campaign. So as usual, if you don't want spoilers and you haven't caught up to all 4 of the sessions thus far, I highly recommend that you check those out before continuing further. So today's session is what I guess I'm now referring to as a 50-50 session, in that we had half the time was spent in combat and the other half was spent in role-playing. It definitely gave Blaze, I think, an opportunity to, I guess, take care of some pent-up frustration that he's been, holding off on for quite some time. He was finally able to release and do some actual hacking and slashing, amongst a bunch of undead, walkers, zombies, lost souls, what have you. It was fun to actually do some combat again, though I think not only myself noticed, but Devin also noticed that combat might have taken a little bit longer than it probably should have. And this is a challenge that that a lot of DMs, including myself, I have a bit of a challenge with this as well, have when they're running combat, is designing combat such that it doesn't drag for too long. Our combat ended up lasting a little bit more than an hour, which I think for 3 people, when you have 3 characters, that is a bit on the long side. It's very hard to maintain the intensity, I think, of combat when it drags on a little bit too much, because then things get to be a little redundant, and there comes a point when it starts, being more tedious than fun. Not to say that the combat that we had suffered from it that much. I mean, but it was definitely noticeable near the end, and Devin himself, like I said, realized this, and as he explains at the end of our session, he, looking back on it, he believes that there were several things that he would have done differently. In general, the more monsters you have, the longer combat tends to be, because even if the monsters are not necessarily challenging you very much, there's still a lot of them, which means that even if you took all of the hit points of, several monsters and added them all up to give one monster, for example, to the players, it typically still takes a lot less time to take down one monster with X amount of hit points than it does with many monsters with that same X amount of hit points but distributed amongst the many monsters. It takes a little bit longer. And so dungeon masters have to be careful when they're doing combat with many monsters, because, especially again when you only have 3 characters, granted, some of those characters might have AoE spells, there still runs the risk of it dragging. Andrew gave a few suggestions as to how to expedite the combat. For example, having a timer for the NPC when Tabak was fighting. Instead of actually rolling for damage on Tabak, there would just be a timer, a set number of rounds that it would take for Tabak to fall. Or I think some DMs also say once you've cleared up a certain number of monsters, it really becomes one-sided. Then clearly the heroes are going to win, and therefore either the monsters try to run away, or the DM might say, okay, you guys clearly win this combat, so we'll assume that you guys managed to kill off all the rest of the monsters, and maybe each monster gets one more attack against all of you before they drop. So there are methods to try to speed things up a little bit. I know that 4th edition, at least in my experience with D&D, is notorious for having ridiculously long combat. I think the length of combat in 5th edition tends to be fairly on par with 3rd and 3.5 edition. I guess the important thing to understand is that interesting or satisfying combat is not directly correlated to the combat being longer. I know that Devin fully understands that and is fully aware of that. But it's, it's something that I noticed from experiencing it as a player in the campaign, because I know that some of the combat in the campaigns that I post on my YouTube channel could also be shaved down too. I am not going to pretend that I don't have a challenge, that isn't a challenge for me either, because it is. I guess it's no surprise that my favorite part of the session was not necessarily the parts that had anything to do with the main plot. It was the role playing that the characters got to do while we were traveling through the woods. I know that Rooney and Quinn got a chance to bond quite a bit, and in general, all three of them, Blaze and Quinn, got to learn a little bit more about Saroon and his past, which I've always am more and more interested in finding out more. So it's really cool to see the characters play off with each other. And in general, I really like watching how our group is starting to gel more and more. I think that's become very apparent. I think there's an understood rapport between the three of them. Yes, Saroon and Quinn are still bantering left and right, but I think it's a lot more playful in nature and not as antagonistic as it was in the beginning. I don't think that neither of them necessarily uh, had any animosity towards each other with their bantering, at least, from the second session and forward. But I definitely see them both, I guess, easing up a little bit. The fact that Quinn actually went out of her way to actually defend Blaze against Saroon, of all people, with Blaze's capabilities and stuff, I think kind of goes to show that, the two of them really do have a respect for each other at the end of the day. And I think that while they were going through the dream sequence, there was a few more exchanges between Quinn and Blaze that showed that, they actually care about each other's well-being. And I don't think that was ever necessarily in question, but it was less verbal and more understood. We still need a lot of help trying to come up with a name for our group. I know what name Blaze wants us to go with, but yeah, we still need some help. So if you guys are able to continue putting your suggestions in the comment section of that video, of that YouTube video on Andrew's channel, we would greatly appreciate it, because some of you guys are coming up with some really awesome group names that I don't think any of us would have been able to come up with. I do want to have more downtime and more opportunities for the three of our characters to just talk, because I feel like, yeah, we get to talk for about 5 minutes, but if Devin lets us, we can go on for like 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I'd like to believe that it's fairly interesting to viewers, because I think that in doing so, we get to dig a little bit deeper with the characters that you normally wouldn't be able to see, sides of the characters that you normally wouldn't be able to see um, if all they did was just completely focus on the mission and their main quest. Because at the end of the day, you want to see these characters as legends, but I think it's more meaningful if you see them as people first. If you can see them as real people and not just, not just as the great heroes of Allburn. Um, you want to try to be able to peel back on the later layers and actually, you know, see some of the humanity that's within them. And I think you really can only get the full benefits of that if we are allowed to talk and converse with each other more, especially when it's about things that are have completely nothing to do with the main quest. I don't think that that is a waste of time necessarily, because I feel that it just enriches, for me as a player, I think it enriches the experience. And not only does it let us peel back on some of the layers of the PCs, but the NPCs too. I think that the discussion with Taybok and some of their musings on his life, on Taybox's life and his situation, and like some of the psychology behind who he is, and what he does. You know, Quinn reaching out to him and actually thanking him for once, because I can't imagine when was the last time anyone ever thanked him for something. And Taybok might not necessarily care one way or another, but I think that's not the point of whether or not he is grateful or not for the gratitude. I think we have to remember that, yes, the PCs are certainly the stars of the campaign, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't try to explore and appreciate the NPCs too, because I think that there definitely is a richness that can be taken from, all of these characters that Devin provides for us, including the legends. And I mean, the same thing that I had to say before, I don't necessarily want to just see these NPCs as just legends. I want to dig deeper with them. And with Taybok, it's a little hard just because of his personality. He's not very, he's very soft-spoken and he doesn't really talk a lot. But in general, I hope, this is a request if you're watching, Devin, I hope that you give us an opportunity to interact with the NPCs more as well, and welcome the opportunity for us to, again, peel some of those layers, like parfaits or onions, peel back those layers to really get deep into their, more of their human side of things, even if they're not necessarily human. Again, and things that have nothing to do with the story. What are the NPCs' hopes and dreams? What are some of their biggest fears? What are their passions? Just because they have a legendary status doesn't mean that they no longer have, hopes and dreams and goals for themselves. I think for me, those are the kind of things that I would love to be able to explore from the other NPCs, because again, it gives us an opportunity to see these characters as real people, not just entities that swoop in when, we're in trouble and try to take on the more difficult monsters, while we take care of the fodder zombie things, like on the side. Is it possible to actually develop bonds and friendships with them? Right now, our relationship with a lot of these NPCs are more business related. Is it possible for us to go deeper? Like have actual more meaningful relationships with them? Maybe see each other as actual friends, best friends, possibly even more. Those are the kind of things that I'd like to explore. I don't want the NPCs to just be entities that help move the storyline forward. That's not enough for me. I would like to have more out of them than just mechanisms for the plot. Not only do I want to talk to them more, maybe, again, depending on their personality, maybe some of them actually want to talk to us. Maybe some of them want to ask us questions, get to know us more. I don't think that it's too far-fetched for certain NPCs to actually try to reach out to us in a social way, not just, to give us the next quest item. Maybe Skulko, wants to play a game of poker with everybody. Maybe Kit the Cat wants to go out for drinks, and we can actually socialize with them during some really good bonding experience downtime. I want to have the opportunity to see these characters as real people. That's the key for me. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys when we game again next Monday. So until then, love yourselves and love each other.